It's getting hot in here, so watch out for your dog's paws. Okay, well that's enough of that. But here in California, we just faced a massive heat wave, and temperatures are still above average in cities all over the country. So how can we protect our pups in the hot weather? Let's bark about it. Hey all you doggo lovers, I'm Bernie Zilio, and this is Alpha Paw, your destination for everything dog. I'm on a mission to answer every doggone question you've ever had about your fur babies. And today we're talking about how we can protect our pups from the heat. And speaking of heat, today we have with us one of Instagram's hottest vet influencers, Dr. Ross Bernstein. Dr. Ross is a seasoned veterinary professional and pet care expert. He earned his doctorate degree in veterinary medicine at the #1 veterinary school in the world, UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, where he was trained under the guidance of some of the world's most renowned veterinary professionals. His work has been featured in several industry-leading publications, including the Journal of Veterinary Surgery. Dr. Ross now works with our Alpha Paw team to ensure we're exclusively promoting the highest quality products, the most authoritative resources, and the most accurate information available today. Welcome to Alpha Pod, Dr. Ross. Did you know that you were considered one of the hottest vet influencers on Instagram?
No, I didn't. That's the first time I'm hearing that. So I'm kind of flattered. I don't really know how to respond, but I'll take it.
All
Thanks.
right, sounds good. So I'm originally from Miami and I love the warm weather, but I know that the heat can sometimes be bad for our dogs. So I guess my question to you is, why is that?
For a couple of reasons. For people, we can lose heat much easier on average than a dog. We can sweat, we can take off layers, whereas dogs, sometimes they can have a pretty heavy fur coat, and especially depending on the breed, some of the Arctic breeds like Huskies or Malamutes, they have very thick coats, and it can be hard for them to get rid of some of that heat if they've started overheating.
So what are kind of the main things that we should be concerned about?
So it's definitely better to prevent them from overheating rather than trying to know what to do once they do start overheating. But signs to look out for are such as excessive panting, they can have excessive drooling, and that can start. Those are some of the early signs, and that can definitely progress into more life-threatening conditions.
So I know that a lot of dogs tend to pant when they're walking or exercising. A lot of dogs tend to drool. What are some of the more progressive symptoms that they could be potentially in danger?
So dogs definitely pant when they get overheated, but it's if you stopped exercising them, if they're lying in the shade, if there's really nothing you can do to get them to stop panting, that's when the panting kind of starts to become a real concern. Some of the more progressive signs when they start overheating can be from dehydration. So if they have excessive salivation, because dogs, they lose their heat through panting and by the evaporative cooling on their tongue, and they can lose a lot of water through their mouth that way. And so if their mouth in the beginning, there can be a lot of excessive drooling. The saliva can start to get sticky and stringy, but then once they start getting dehydrated, their gums can start to become dry and tacky, and they can even become very red, like brick red. And that's a sign of vasodilation, where they've dilated all their blood vessels on the periphery and they're trying to lose heat that way.
Oh my God, that's so scary. So God forbid your dog ends up in this situation. Let's say you're on a hike or they're at the dog park. Like, what can you do once your dog is in that position?
If you're in that position and you notice that they're panting a lot, maybe they had excessive salivation and now they've stopped and their gums are dry and tacky. Number one, you want to stop exercising and stop doing activity. You want to seek a cooler place, such as the shade. If you have water, you can allow them to drink, and you can even take that water and spray it over their body. So getting them wet can help allow some evaporative cooling. And if you have a fan with you, if there's a breeze, or if you're in the car, open the windows, turn on the air conditioning. Extra air blowing through their wet hair can help cool them down.
Okay. And at what point should you take your dog to the vet?
So there was a study that looked at dogs going to animal hospitals after having a heat stroke. And if dogs get to the vet within 90 minutes of having a heat stroke, it shows that only 1/4 of them will eventually go on to die. Whereas if it takes them more than 90 minutes to get to the vet after having heat stroke, about 2/3 of them will die. Now, that study also showed that if we do some of the steps that I'm sure we'll get into later, of steps that you can do to help them cool down, and you take them to the vet, all the dogs in that study survived. Now, that doesn't mean that you eliminate the chance of dying. Every scenario is going to be unique, but it's just those are some important things to keep in mind.
This is comforting to hear because I'm that person that takes my dog to the vet for any minor thing, and I feel like my vet makes fun of me when I leave.
I'm not sure why that happened, and I'm sorry that did. It's always
No,
better
I
to
made
be
it up. I
safe
don't
than
think he's
sorry.
actually doing it.
It's always better to be safe
Okay.
than sorry. And your vet would rather have an interaction with you and your dog and have it have a good outcome rather than you get there and it's too late. That's not fun for anyone.
So how do we know if it's too hot for dogs? Like, is there a specific temperature outside that you should be like, okay, I'm not going to take him on a walk. I'm not going to take her to the park.
I don't know if there's a specific temperature that's too hot for dogs. Now, some dogs have heavier coats than others. Some dogs run harder and faster. Some dogs, like bulldogs, for example, are brachycephalic and they just have a lot of trouble breathing, and that can affect the way that they're able to lose heat once they start overheating. So it's going to depend on the breed of dog. It's going to depend on the type of exercise that they're doing. It's going to depend on how much water they've had. It can also depend on the humidity. And it's definitely hotter during the summer months, but if it got hot during a spring day, you would have to be careful on those days as well.
So basically, it depends on the breed, the coat, the type of exercise, what your dog's kind of used to. So basically common sense, I would assume, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and your dog can get accustomed to doing exercise in warmer weather. I would kind of compare that to you or I. If we started training in very hot weather, we can get a little bit more used to it. We can get more fit, but to dogs, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. It's not like they're all of a sudden going to be able to do things that are out of their physiologic normal. So still, that you should definitely be careful. Even if your dog is used to doing exercise when it's hot outside, you should still be careful.
Okay, now this is kind of a personal question, but I do live in California and I love taking my dog on hikes. But I never know of course he pants the whole time, but then I'm like, is this too strenuous? Is it too hot out? Is the gravel bad for his paws? Like, I never really know how to gauge that.
Yeah. So if you're going to be taking your dog hiking in the summer, I'd recommend doing it either early in the morning when it's not, or late at night when it's not too hot. Trails that are out of direct sunlight or direct beams are also good for dogs. Some people sometimes worry about sun exposure and skin cancers. It's definitely, I think, more of a concern for people because we don't have hair covering most of our skin. There are some very pale dogs with less fur. And so sometimes if they're the type of dog that lies out on their back all day in the sun, they can be at risk for developing some skin cancers. But in general, it's more of a skin cancer from sun exposure, I would say, is more of a risk for people than for dogs. But getting back to your original question of hiking outside, bring plenty of water. You can bring a fan. You can find shaded areas. If you start to see that they are panting excessively, you can stop the exercise, allow them to take a break, drink some water. You can even splash some on them. And kind of, you want to be in tune with what their body is showing you.
Are there any ways to know that your dog is overheating, like before he or she starts displaying the symptoms of excessive panting, lots of drool?
Sometimes they're running around and they want to take breaks themselves. They can seek out shade themselves. They can go over, if there is a place where they have access to water, they can go and drink more frequently. Sometimes dogs will just lie down when they're too tired. But when they do start showing those signs where there's nothing you can do to make them stop panting or excessive drooling, if you do start cooling them with water, always make sure it's lukewarm or like room temperature water rather than ice cold water, because that can cause vasoconstriction or tightening of the blood vessels in the periphery, which can actually trap heat inside their body rather than let it go out. If you're at home or you have ice packs, you could take ice packs and put them on their neck or on their groin or armpit regions where there are some of the major blood vessels like the carotid arteries or the femoral arteries. And that can help cooling. Now, you wouldn't want to keep that ice pack there for more than about 10 minutes or so without rotating it. That is a way you could cool them. You could splash them with that lukewarm water or wet a towel and put the towel on them. And if you had a fan, you could blow that fan on them. If you're in the car, you could open the windows or put on the air conditioning. And those are some ways that you could try to cool them down. If none of that's working, then the next step is to go to your veterinarian. And there's some more things that we could do at the hospital.
Wow. I personally had no idea that cold water was harmful to your dog if they're overheating. Is it, I mean, this is out of your realm, but is it the same for humans?
I actually don't know. I mean, I would say the cold water, there's two risks that I would say with the cold water. One that I mentioned, it can cause vasoconstriction in the peripheral vessels. And with dogs, and us too, if we overheat, we vasodilate, and that helps bring our blood to the periphery and we can have heat exchange. Another risk is that if you put them in cold water, they can actually lose heat too quickly and then they can become hypothermic. And that can be bad too. You don't want to have huge fluctuations in their temperature. So if we were in the hospital, for example, and we were cooling a dog, so if they came in there, the dog's normal temperature is 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit to 102.5. So if they came in around 106, for example, we would probably cool them down to about 103.5, and then we'd probably do it a little bit slower from there. Now, we don't want to do it too fast to risk causing them to become hypothermic or too cold. And we also just don't want to do anything too quickly.
Wow, this is fascinating. I had no idea. And now I feel like I can't take my dog outside ever again.
Oh, you definitely
But no,
can.
this is helpful. So if we are worried about this heat, how can we make sure that our dogs are getting the proper exercise without necessarily spending a ton of time outside?
You can play with them inside too, where there's air conditioning and they're out of direct sunlight. But if you were going outside, you can go out early in the morning or late at night when it's not in direct sunlight. You can do activities in shaded areas. You could do activities such as swimming, although still the water shouldn't be too hot, and they can also overheat even coming out of after swimming. So if you are going to take them outside to do exercise, just be cognizant of the signs to look out for. Always carry plenty of fresh water. You could bring a fan with you if you wanted, but it's always best to be prepared and know what to do in the event that something does happen.
So is there one thing that you wish pet owners knew in regard to protecting their dogs from heat stroke or overheating?
Most important thing is prevention. Prevention is key. It's always easier to prevent it than from treating it. But then the next step is to recognize the signs early so that you can be prepared and know what to do.
Awesome. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. We are so grateful to have you as part of the Alpha Paw family. Do you have more questions for Dr. Ross? Write them down in the comment section below to be featured in a future video. Again, I'm Bernie Zilio, and this is Alpha Paw. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss a single doggone episode. We'll see you next time.